what we call an MPs panel, so representatives of the Conservatives, the Liberals, and the NDP, three of the major parties in the House. And we had intended to have that panel for you today, but just moments before we went to air, we got a call from the Prime Minister's office to say that the Member of Parliament from the Conservative Party who was to join us today was no longer permitted to appear on the panel. This came just moments after the issuance of the statement that they were no longer going to pursue revising the words to "O Canada," but officially they said because we were going to talk about the Afghan detainee issue that James Rajat, who's a regular here on Power Play, would not be permitted to attend. So we regret we do not have a Conservative MP, but that's the background of the story. Who we do have here is Ujjal Dosanjh of the Liberals and, of course, Jack Harris of the NDP. Welcome to you both. Let's start with, actually, what the heck? Let's start with the O Canada thing. What happened here? I mean, this is stunning. 2 days after the throne speech, and they have, I mean, nobody could figure out why that was in the throne speech in the first place.
Particularly after one of the more nationalistic and Canadian moments or 2 weeks that we've had, where everybody loved the anthem, broke into the anthem spontaneously, and waved the flag all over Canada, particularly in Vancouver, and you then say we're going to now try and see if we can change this, and trying to be too politically correct. I think Canadians are over that. They don't want to be politically correct. They just want to do the right thing.
Were you disappointed, Jack, that this has now been pulled off the shelf?
I thought that the Prime Minister had finally figured it out, that there was a problem, that it wasn't gender neutral. He was going to fix it, and they were going to have a debate in Parliament. And I was trying to figure out who was going to be on the other side, who wanted to keep it that way. Now it appears it's the supporters of the Prime Minister are not too happy with the idea of having a gender neutral O Canada. And so I'm disappointed, yes, because hey, it was about time this got fixed. Those words were invented, by the way, in 1968 by...
Would you have taken out God?
A joint committee of the...
Would you have taken out God?
God? Does God have a gender?
Well, no, God's in the peace thing. You see, this is the difficulty of all of this.
We should leave the anthem alone.
Maybe we'll just hum it from here on in. That might be the way to do it. Let's move on to the Afghan detainee issue, the one reason that we don't have a Conservative sitting with us today, which is a shame, I think.
But indicative. Obviously, they don't want to be accountable on this issue. They don't want to be accountable to Parliament. They don't want to be accountable to the Canadian people. And they don't want to be accountable to the media.
Well, let's us talk about it then. It is going to Frank Iacobucci, a respected jurist in this country, 72 years old, served on the Supreme Court of Canada, has done a lot of work for the government in many areas before in terms of looking into various issues. He's independent, it's arm's length from government. What's wrong with that?
Well, no problem with his credentials. I think the issue here is that this is another delaying tactic. They probed to delay this. They're now delaying this with the appointment of Frank Iacobucci and giving him a task, which is to take away part of the documents and only disclose the other parts to Parliament. He would know from his own judgment, sitting on the Supreme Court of Canada, from his own judgments in various cases, that at the core, at the heart of that task is the constitutional question. That implicit in the process that he would be engaged in would be a violation of the Constitution. And I am sure, if he thought about it, because the ultimate objective is to keep certain documents from Parliament, and that is unconstitutional, according to his own judgments. So I think that he himself might begin to think about that. But the government, if they're going to have this judge look at this issue, what they should do is do the complete task. He is the right man for the wrong job. The right job for him would be a full judicial public inquiry, where he gets the documents, looks at them, and tells Canadians the story about the allegations.
But he's also a retired judge, and that's not a bad thing. But, I mean, he doesn't have the ability to issue a ruling that would have the weight of law behind it. Should this have been a decision, Jack, for example, that maybe should have been referred to the Supreme Court for a ruling on?
No, I mean, he's going to advise, there's 2 or 3 things he might do. Supposedly he's going to advise the Minister of Justice what documents to make available to Parliament. That's totally outside of the parliamentary rights and privileges that exist and that have existed as long as parliaments have existed. We have a constitutional right, an obligation to hold the government to account, but also the right to have access to government papers. We also, I mean, as citizens of Canada and as parliamentarians, would have an opportunity and the right to deal with any real security issues, and we could do that. But what they're doing is continuously refusing to respect Parliament, refusing to respect the rights of Parliament, and to get someone outside of he's Mr. Iacobucci, a retired justice, very respected man, but he's not, as you say, a judicial officer at this point in time. He's only advising them as to what should be made available to Parliament. That's not a proper role. The Parliament has the right to decide that, and that whatever happens should be inside of Parliament. This is an opportunity, or an attempt, in my view, to kick this out of the ballpark for 6 months to a year, and the fact that they don't have anyone here to talk about it, they think they can stonewall this issue because they've appointed Mr. Iacobucci. I don't think that the people will be satisfied with that.
Let's deal with the core concern that the Conservatives express, and that is that they're saying there are issues here of national security, that they can't just simply dump the documents in Parliament in open form, that would compromise national security. And therefore, if you're looking for a yes or no answer, yes, I release the documents, or no, I don't release the documents, that by going to yes, then you put all sorts of sensitive stuff out there that may compromise national security. So how do you deal with that?
Well, Parliament itself can devise processes to deal with the questions of national security. Parliament is the ultimate arbiter of these issues. The government is not, no lawyer is, no judge is. And so so without diminishing or admitting that the Parliament does not have those supreme powers, let me just say that if a government really wants a solution, if they're interested in telling Canadians the whole story, if they're interested in the truth and not hiding behind Mr. Iacobucci, they should then give Mr. Justice Iacobucci an appointment as a judicial public officer to do a full inquiry like the Connor inquiry and others, so that he can actually put a story together for Canadians as to what happened. Who knew? What did they know? Why didn't they act? Why have they continued to send?
So you're saying if that happened, you would stop asking that the documents be released to Parliament?
But we could continue to ask questions. Obviously, there would be then no need for anyone to take the documents, because a judge with a full public judicial inquiry would have the subpoena powers, would have the power to hear from others, not just look at the documents.
Jack, let me go to this case here, because, I mean, one of the things, again, that the Conservatives say, and with some justification, I might add, is that even if you put it into an in-camera committee, this is one of the leakiest places on the face of the planet. I mean, wouldn't that stuff get out?
No, I mean, we're talking about two things. This is not about national security. This is about the government trying to hide the truth from Canadians, and this is their way of stalling it and avoiding it as long as they possibly can. You know, the Premier said, the Prime Minister said today that, well, if the Liberals are concerned about what happened with the earlier agreement, well, they asked their fellows. Well, if he really thinks that there was a problem with the previous government's use of this, he, as the Prime Minister of this country, should be calling a public inquiry to make sure that whatever happened doesn't happen again, and that there wasn't a pattern that was set and followed. So, you know, we've got a serious national question here. It's not about national security. It's really about government accountability and whether or not the government of our country has ensured that we acted in accordance with the laws, international laws that we uphold. You know, we've never been involved in prisoner transfers before this mission. We've always had handed them over to the Brits or handed them over to the Americans in the Second World War or to the UN in Korea. We started to do this time, but we did not do this right, and we think, and we're pretty convinced, that serious problems occurred. That's got to get out in the open.
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time. Ujjal Dosanjh, Jack Harris, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.